So a lot of you know us for our short form motorcycle content on YouTube. We do things like oil changes, brake fluid changes, chain cleaning, and your occasional jigsaw roasting. Yo Adobo, you think I could have that old pin? Yeah, here you go, Jigsaw Greg. That's better. But we've never had a long form video. We will show you a little bit of everything. This is Sportbike Maintenance 101. Welcome back to Adobo Moto. So this is my 2015 BMW S1000RR, and this is a sport bike. Some people call it a super bike, but the truth is, it's a motorcycle. Now, this is plastic. On this bike, it's plastic. And on this bike, it's also plastic. But some fairings are also carbon fiber. But at the end of the day, all these plastic things covering the motorcycle, they're called fairings. So this is my new fairing set. It's from a company called Armor Bodies. This one is made with a special resin that they use in racing kayaks. What I like about Armor Bodies is they use like full sheets of fiberglass, so it is super strong. When you crash it, it kind of stays in one piece. It doesn't crack, it doesn't break. This is a Superbike seat. You know it's a Superbike seat because it doesn't have the cutout for the OEM seat, like this Super Sport seat right here. Okay, next we're at the forward set of controls. The reason they call it the forward set of controls is because it's in the front. Right here we have our clip-ons. The reason they call them clip-ons is because they clip onto the shock. This is the throttle. Pretty self-explanatory. Some throttles are ride-by-wire, which I'll show you in a second, and some throttles are ride-by-cable like this ZX-10R right here. There's two cables running out of this throttle, and both of those cables act as a push-pull, so that way it flicks back like that. Now coming to the left side, we have the clutch lever. Same thing, pull. There's the wire right there, and that releases your clutch discs. This is a basic maintenance video. You don't really need to know what the clutch discs do. But if this ever gets tight, you can just spray some WD-40 in there, or use some kind of clutch cable lube. But I just spray WD-40. Now also up front is your brake setup. This is your brake lever, brake master cylinder. That's the bleed nipple right here. And this is your brake reservoir. In here is where you put your favorite Gixxer brake fluid. Now changing your brake fluid is extremely important. Used brake fluid can develop a lot of condensation, and you don't want water in your lines because it'll corrode the rubber lines. Okay, so you got to remove the cap first. This is the reservoir. It was just a screw, and this is the thing that holds it. Next, I like to take a towel, just kind of poke a hole in it, get it over the reservoir. That will kind of help prevent dripping. Take out this cap. There's a little rubber piece. Move this to the side. From here, I'm going to take another towel and just soak up all that old fluid. That way I'm not flushing old crap into the lines. Let's just get all the crap that we can from the top out. See it up? Alright, this goes into the garbage. Here you're going to top it off with the fresh fluid right at the top. Okay, this is my brake fluid catch can. This is a silicone hose. Find the caliper, and we're going to bleed from both sides. This is the bleed nipple right here. You just take off that rubber and stick this side into here. There you go. Brake fluid change every 2 years. Which in my opinion is idiotic. This is probably just for street riding, but this is a track bike. And even if I was to only street ride the R6, I would still change the brake fluid frequently. How do you know when to change the brake fluid? Well, when it's the color of my face. Once I see the color starts to change, that means the fluid has been used up. As in, there's heat that's been applied to it, and that's part of the temperature change. In the owner's manual, this is the bleeding order on the front hydraulic brake system. You start with the front master cylinder, and then do the calipers, and then back to the master cylinder. This is the master cylinder. These are the calipers. So Yamaha wants you to start with the master cylinder, down to the calipers. It doesn't say left or right. It's first, it just says go to the calipers, and then go back to the master cylinder. I'm skipping the first part because I don't want to go back. What I do instead is I go calipers and then master. But as always, follow what's in the manual. For me, it doesn't matter. All I do is loosen this, break that loose. Make sure you can tighten it and loosen it with your finger. I'm gonna pull on this lever all the way down, but I'm gonna pull this out first. You'll see the fluid come out right there. And then you wanna tighten this down. This is like an old school way to do it. And this is the way I prefer to do it, okay? And then come back up here and just push, push, push till you got brake pressure, and then loosen this again. At the same time, push in this. Pump, pump, pump till it's stiff. I'm gonna loosen this nipple while pushing this down. That pushes brake fluid out. Close this, pump, pump, pump. Now here's the important thing. Don't pump on this with this open. This always has to be closed. That keeps air from getting into the system. And you just do this until the fluid level drops in here. And you don't want it to drop all the way down because again, you don't want to introduce air bubbles into the system. Once it drops, top it off, do the other side, and then come back and do the master cylinder, which is again connected to the front brake lever. So I'm gonna keep going. It's a very, very fast movement. Again, I've been doing this forever. Fluid actually looks pretty damn clear down here. So I'm gonna move to the other side now. Now before I remove that, keep the mess to a minimum. Hold up. Wow. Dab that real quick. Rubber cover back on. Make sure this is tight. Boom. All right, now we're gonna do the front master cylinder. The bleed nipple is under this rubber cover. As you can see, our brake fluid reservoir is now almost empty. I'm gonna top that off. Loosen this. Loose, pump, fluid comes out, tighten, pump, pump, get pressure back, loosen, pump, fluid comes out, tighten, pressure comes back, same thing. Again, I do the master cylinder last. But per the manual, it goes master cylinder, calipers, master cylinder. That's good enough for me. Pull this out slowly so you don't make a mess. Fluid goes in here, look at all that. And finally, just top off the fluid. There is a line that you don't want to go over. It goes as upper, lower. Those are two lines. You just put fluid right in between that and you should be good. Now you can put the cap back on. And I just like to wipe this down because there's probably a lot of water. I like to make sure it's at least semi-dry before I put it back. You don't want to reintroduce condensation back into the fluid, so it's important to just clean this out. Okay, this goes on. Same thing, clean the inside, get rid of the condensation, and then just twist it back on. Cover lock back, tighten that down. Now, moving down to the brake calipers, there's two lines that come down on either side. This is the caliper. Now, the brake calipers also have a bleed valve. Right in there. And in here are your brake pads. Now while we're down here, I'm gonna show you guys how to check your brake pads. So you're gonna wanna remove this bolt and this bolt. So checking your brake pads is super easy. There's two caliper bolts that you gotta worry about. 1, 2. And then you don't really have to do anything. You just pull it up and then it should just come out pretty easily. Now you can see your brake pads, and you can see the brake pistons, and you can see the caliper pistons. Just make sure it's all in decent condition. I'm gonna try to clean it out later on, but for the purpose of this video, this is how you check it. Now as you can see in here, I have plenty of brake pad life left. The friction plates aren't anywhere near the base. There's a lot of pad in here. Now if they're thin and they're getting close to the metal base on the pads themselves, just replace them, they're cheap. Again, for the purpose of this video, I'm just gonna undo this quick disconnect. Not every bike's gonna be the same, but they're all pretty similar. There's two cotter pins that hold the main pin that holds the pads. Get this out. This is like a spring, and then do a closer inspection of the pads. They look great. Check the condition of the pistons, and in my opinion, they also look great. So everything's going back. And it's just about aligning the pin to go through all the holes. Put your cotter pins back in, or your clips. And from here, you just put the calipers back in. You slide the pads right in between the rotor. So, since I have a QD, just line them up, put your 2 bolts back in, and get them torqued down to spec. Read your manual. Okay, now we're moving to the rear sets. Why do they call it rear sets? Because it's the rear set of controls. Get it? Your right foot controls the rear brake. This is the rear brake lever. This is the rear brake master cylinder. This line goes to the brake fluid reservoir right here. And back here is your rear brake calipers, and right here is where you bleed all the fluid. All right, now let's move on to the fuel. Fill up the tank from the top, insert your key, unlock it, and this is where you fill gas. Now, what's important about this is if you're gonna store your bike, you wanna top off that tank to the brim because it will develop it will develop condensation over time, especially if left in the winter. So having little room as possible makes for less water. Now let's move to the left side of the rear set. The left side controls the shifter. This bike has a quick shifter up and down. This is the quick shift module. Now behind the shift linkage is the front sprocket. It's important to take this cover off and get this inside cleaned up really well. A lot of gunk develops in here, but whenever possible, I run without the front sprocket cover, like this. Now, don't get the front sprocket cover confused with the chain guard. My chain guard is still installed. It's that little metal piece right there. And that protects your engine block in case the chain ever snaps. Yeah, my chain and sprockets are pretty filthy on this bike, for sure. Now what else is important? The motor. Let's check the oil. There's different ways to check the oil on different bikes. This bike, for example, has a dipstick. Let me show you. You untwist this and you pull it out to see the dipstick. Now, as you can see here, it seems like there's no oil in it. But most bikes require you to tilt the bike upright, and some bikes require you to start the engine and get the oil warm. Check your owner's manual. Now, for this bike, the bike does need to be started and it does need to be upright. You got to get it to the right operating temp, turn it off, let it cool down for a little bit, and then check the dipstick. All right, let's turn the bike on. Let this run to op temp. Okay, this bike is now at 108 degrees. I think that's hot enough. We're gonna straighten the bike up and then check the oil. So since this bike is on an incline, I'm just gonna put it in gear. That'll keep it from rolling forward. We got this standing straight up. Pull out the dipstick, wipe it off. Put it back in, and there's no oil. I forgot, this should also be on a level surface, so we're gonna straighten this out. Whoa. Now it's level, the bike's cooled down. Let's check the engine oil. And that is right in between. So that looks good. Now, some bikes are a little bit easier. They come with a window sight. Again, check your owner's manual to make sure that you're checking this properly. Now, on this bike, I actually thought there was no oil. Look, check this out. Because it looks like there's no oil, but the bike is tilted. So when I tilt it up, is there oil? Yep. Now, tire pressure is probably one of the most debated topics when it comes to sport bike riding, but there is a little guide on your swing arm most of the time. Now, if you ride a sport bike, you definitely want to get a rear stand. Having a rear stand makes sport bike maintenance a lot easier. Now let's find the maximum PSI on this tire. These numbers represent this specific tire. It says max load is 365 kilograms or 305 pounds, and the max PSI is 42 cold. Some people think that that's the recommended tire pressure, but if you look on your swing arm like this BMW, it gives you a bunch of values right here. You see this 120/70 R17, that is for the front tire. That helmet represents one person. That plus and the luggage represents luggage, and then plus another person is 2.5 bars or 36 PSI. Same thing corresponds to the rear. The rear says 42 PSI, and it even shows you a 255 rear tire pressure recommendation. Now, tire pressure is all about feel. Too little of a tire pressure, and the tire will feel like a deflated soccer ball. Too much air will make the tire feel bouncy. What you want is a tire in between, hard and soft. It's all about feel, kind of like how jigsaw riders like their toys. Too hard will be too rough, too soft will be too mushy. Now I know you guys are gonna ask me what tire pressure I run, so now what is the proper way to check your tire pressure? Well, that's simple. Check it when they're cold. Bike has not been ridden. Let's go ahead and check the tire pressure on this bike. Recommended tire pressure says 42. And I have it at just a hair over 30 PSI. which is kind of what I like. Next thing we want to check is chain tension or chain slack. The recommended chain slack on this bike is on the swing arm, 45 to 50 millimeters. Now, I'm not a mathematician, so I'm gonna see how many inches that is. So that's 1.7 to 1.9 inches, so just under 2 inches. Now, how you measure the chain slack is also just as important. What you wanna do is pull down and then push up. And you wanna measure at the same points. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my measuring tape. Now, I'm gonna find it somewhere in the middle. That looks about the middle to me. I'm gonna use this pin right here. I'm gonna pull that down all the way, as far as it can go. Now that's at 2.5 inches. Now I'm gonna push it up. And it's right at about almost 3/4 of an inch. So that's 1 inch and about 3/4, which is about 1.75 inches. So we're actually perfect. If you've ever changed grips when you were a kid on your BMX bike, it's kind of the same thing, except this one side is bigger than the other. You see the diameter? Since there's a throttle tube, the bigger one's gonna go in here. And it just comes right off. And as you can see, there's a little bit of damage there, but it shouldn't affect anything. I'm just gonna hit this with a little brake cleaner just to get it cleaned off. Now, to help it slide in easier, I'm just gonna spray some brake cleaner in here. I'm just gonna squeeze the end. Brake cleaner just dries so quickly. There we go. And the throttle should pretty much just snap back like that. Now you know how to do grips. Same thing on the other side. Okay, I don't have grip glue, but I do have some silicone glue. That should be fine. That should be good. All right, to end this basic maintenance video, we have my Aprilia RSV4. I wanted to show you guys one of the most important aspects of a motorcycle that a lot of people forget about. It's fuses. This is where my fuse box is. Every motorcycle is different, so check your owner's manual. Mine just happens to be under the seat. As you can see here, there's the battery. And if you live in a cold climate, you can get a battery tender. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially a wire that you plug to your battery, and then you plug that into a charger that like kind of trickle charges your battery. But I haven't had to do that on this bike. This is my fuse box right here. These are all spares. So here, check this out. Okay, boom. So these are spares right here, and these are the main fuses. Sometimes it'll tell you in here like what they're for, but for the Aprilia, it's actually in the manual, and it's not that hard to find. I have had friends' bikes shut off because of their fuses. Nate, if you're watching this, you know what happened. We had to take his bike all the way to Olympia because obviously it was still under warranty, only for them to tell us that it was a fuse. So he ended up carrying spare fuses, and then we went out for a ride one time, and again, his bike died and he had to replace a fuse. So it's important to carry extra fuses. There's an important fuse, which is more like a relay. This is my starter relay, and this one does not have a spare anywhere on the bike. Okay, so this fuse right here, it's a 30 amp fuse. Yours could be a different size, I don't know. But when this blows, watch what happens to the bike. Key in, nothing happens. So this has blown on me once before, and I should carry spares, but it only blew because I shorted something. Put the fuse back. Okay, now watch. We're back in business. And I think that's it for this video.